In a high-stakes bank robbery, a crew of criminals unknowingly unlocks a terrifying secret buried deep within the vault, ghosts of past victims and a masked killer with a deadly agenda. As the line between reality and nightmare blurs, survival becomes a race against time, and not everyone will make it out alive. Today I'll recap a 2017 horror drama film, The Vault, so keep your eyes wide open and stay safe. The movie starts with a series of shots showing newspaper clippings about a bank robbery. The robbery involves hostages and results in a standoff with the police that lasts for several days. The clippings end with a shot of a masked man holding up a lighter. The scene cuts to a big cloud of smoke rising from a building. Fire trucks rush by, trying to put out the fire. Elsewhere, we see Ed, the assistant bank manager, standing alone in a break room. The scene quickly cuts to some disturbing images, like the same masked man from the beginning of the movie. We also see several people with bloody bags over their heads. These shots are mixed with close-ups of Ed's face, looking worried and confused. Out in the main lobby, a man walks into the bank, led in by a policeman standing by the door. He heads straight to the coffee station and pours himself a cup. He adds some liquor to his coffee from a small bottle. The man then goes up to the teller and finishes his transaction. He asks her out for a drink during happy hour. The teller comments that it seems like he's already been drinking and hands him his receipt, telling him to leave. As he walks out, the policeman at the door calls him a detective. The man replies, telling the officer to keep the people in the bank away from the fire down the block. While all of this is happening, a young woman named Leah is sitting in a waiting area. She gets called over by the bank's manager. Leah goes into his office and hands him her resume, explaining that she's there to apply for a job as a teller. The bank manager tells her that there are 3 teller spots open because the tellers he's hired before keep quitting. When Leah asks why they keep quitting, the manager hesitates. But after Leah reassures him that she still wants the job, he finally admits that the tellers left because they saw and heard spooky things in the basement of the bank. Back in the lobby, another woman named V walks up to a teller and starts complaining that several checks she wrote have bounced, causing charges from both the bank and the people the checks were for. V gets more and more upset, using bad words, and demands to see a manager. In the background, the police officer and a bank security guard start walking toward her, but the officer stops to let a group of firefighters inside, probably because of the nearby fire. Fed up with V's swearing and refusal to calm down, the security guard tries to arrest her. V fights back, pulling out brass knuckles from her pocket and hitting him. The police officer calls in a disturbance over his radio and rushes to stop V. Meanwhile, back in the manager's office, Leah pulls out a shotgun and points it at the manager. One of the firefighters then hits the police officer with the flat side of his axe, knocking him out. It turns out that Leah, V, and the 3 men dressed as firefighters, Kramer, Michael, and Cyrus, are all part of the same group planning to rob the bank. After taking hostages of all the staff and customers, they force the head teller, Susan, to open the vault. Michael starts moving the hostages into the vault, while Kramer forces Susan to open the vault's cash deposit box, only to find it's nearly empty. Kramer brings the bag of money back to the lobby and tells the rest of the group that there's only about $70,000, which is far less than their goal of $500,000. This leads to an argument among the crew about what to do next. Some of them want to cut their losses and run, but others insist they stay and keep searching for more money because they have a debt to pay and can't leave without it. Ed, now a hostage, yells over to the crew that he knows where there's more money in the bank and that he'll help them. The crew holds him at gunpoint, demanding more details. Ed agrees to tell them if they promise not to hurt anyone else. The crew agrees, and Ed reveals that there's an old vault in the basement with over $6 million in cash. Excited by this news, Kramer grabs a drill and heads down to the basement to open the vault, saying it will take about 20 minutes. Leah and Cyrus take Ed to the security office so they can watch everything on the live camera feeds. Michael goes to the vault with the hostages to keep an eye on them. V stays in the bank lobby. Inside the vault, the hostages beg Michael to let them go, telling him they don't think he's a bad guy. They ask him to free them. He tells them all to be quiet, but Susan then asks Michael if she can go to the washroom. Michael hesitates, but agrees. While they're in the washroom, Susan again asks him to rethink keeping them as hostages. Michael opens up to her, revealing that V and Leah are his sisters, and they're helping him rob the bank because he owes money to dangerous people he can't pay back. Susan once more asks Michael to let her go, but he ignores her and takes her back to the vault when she says she can't leave with him pacing outside the stall door. When they return, V tells Michael to go start cutting through a pipe in the basement, which will help them escape after they raid the vault. Michael agrees and heads down to a different part of the basement from where Kramer is working. During all of this, ever since Kramer started drilling in the basement, the lights in the bank have been flickering. The group finds it strange, but decides it's just a power surge. As Kramer finishes the drilling, he tries to open the vault. V, Leah, and Cyrus watch him through the cameras. When Kramer looks up from his tools, he sees a shadowy figure at the end of a dim hallway. Thinking it's a crew member, he tells them to go back upstairs and watch the hostages, but the figure doesn't move, and Kramer searches for a flashlight, which doesn't work. When he looks up again, he sees a second shadow standing there. just staring at him. Confused because the figures don't show up on the cameras, V radios Kramer, asking what's going on. Kramer tries to respond, but all V, Leah, and Cyrus hear is static. Suddenly, Kramer hears a noise behind him and turns around to see the masked man from the start of the film. Looking back at the hallway, he sees the silhouettes have multiplied into 4. As the figures slowly move toward him, Kramer screams. His scream is heard by Michael as Kramer falls backward into the vault, disappearing from the camera feed. Ed, the only one who doesn't look shocked, has been staring at the screen with a blank expression the whole time. Worried, V runs to the basement door, but it closes by itself just as she gets there, locking her out. At the same time, Cyrus goes into the vault to check on the hostages, while Leah stays in the lobby to keep watch. Cyrus is told to count the hostages and make sure everyone is there. As he starts counting, he notices some of the hostages have dirty, bloody bags over their heads, pressed so tightly that their eyes and mouths are covered, making them look like skulls. These hostages look just like the ones in Ed's creepy visions from the beginning of the movie. Behind them stands the masked man. The vault door slowly begins to close, trapping Cyrus inside. He fights with the terrifying hostages, managing to rip off one of their hoods and reveal a horribly burned corpse underneath. Before he can escape, Cyrus is knocked to the ground, and the masked man shoves a shotgun into his mouth. The sound of the gunshot is drowned out by the loud bang of V shooting the lock on the basement door. While this is happening, Michael, who had heard Kramer scream earlier, goes to check on him. When he reaches the vault, he finds Kramer sitting inside with a bloody rag over his face. Michael pulls off the rag and sees that Kramer's eyes have been gouged out, but he's still breathing. Suddenly, Kramer gasps for air and, in a horrifying moment, shoves the vault drill into his own head, ending his life. Shocked and terrified, Michael stumbles back out of the vault. Back in the security office, Leah is angry and starts questioning Ed, accusing him of being part of the plan and setting them up. Ed insists he has no idea what's happening, and just as he says that, the phone rings. Leah answers and holds the phone to Ed's ear, telling him to make the people go away. But, to their surprise, it's the detective from earlier, Tom, who demands to speak to Leah. Realizing that the police know about the robbery, Leah quickly hangs up the phone, shocked. Leah, now more furious, drags Susan out of the vault and asks her if she's the one who contacted the police. Susan denies it and says it was the bank itself. She explains that back in 1982, a man tried to rob the same bank, took hostages, and demanded to be transported. This is the same robbery shown in the news clippings at the start of the film, and the robber was the man in the mask. Susan continues, telling Leah that the man held out for days without food or water, but eventually snapped and killed the hostages in awful ways, even burning some of them alive in the vault. The police found more and more bodies, but never found the masked man or any trace of him. Susan is convinced that the masked man is still in the basement and is the reason the crew is in trouble. Leah doesn't believe her and threatens to electrocute Susan with a broken lamp still plugged in. Just as Leah is about to hurt Susan, Michael stops her and walks away, looking disappointed. V comes back from the basement with a duffel bag full of cash. Leah takes one look at it and immediately senses that something's not right. She notices that all the bills are printed with the year 1982, the same year of the robbery Susan told her about. V doesn't seem bothered by this and brushes it off, telling Leah she's losing her mind. This makes Leah even more upset, and the two start arguing. Suddenly, a window nearby shatters, and both Leah and V think it's the police shooting at them. Meanwhile, Michael heads back to the basement to keep cutting the pipe for their escape. As he walks down a dark hallway, he hears a woman's voice calling for help. Curious, Michael follows the sound and finds a young woman lying on the ground, asking for help. She says she thinks her ankle is broken and asks if Michael is one of them. Michael, confused, is about to ask what she means when he hears V calling his name from behind. He turns around, but when he looks back at the woman, she's no longer lying there. Instead, she's turned into a rotting corpse that suddenly lunges at Michael. Back in the manager's office, Leah picks up a phone call. On the other end, she hears a strange, crackly voice saying that a robbery is happening at the bank she's in. Leah knows that none of her hostages could have called this in, and she starts to believe that Susan might actually be telling the truth about the creepy story. Meanwhile, V talks to Ed, who asks her what she plans to do next since she's the only one who seems to have any clear thinking left. This question is strange for Ed, since he hasn't said much about all the weird things happening around them. After hearing the call about the robbery, Leah gets another call, this time from the detective. He apologizes for the shot fired at Leah and V. Leah tells him she can only control the situation for so long and says she'll release one of the hostages to keep the police at bay a little longer. After letting the hostage go, Leah gets another call. It's the same eerie voice from earlier, still complaining about a robbery happening at the bank. As Leah listens to the call, Susan, who's sitting nearby, looks up at her and asks, "Did you hear it?" V returns to the basement looking for Michael. As she walks through one of the rooms, she finds Cyrus's body, his head blown off from the jaw up, with blood splattered all over the walls. It's a horrifying sight. She continues walking down the hallway and finds Michael, but he looks totally out of his mind. He's splashing gasoline all over the walls. When he sees V, he grabs her and tells her that the escape pipe is ready for her to use and that she should run. V asks Michael what he's doing and begs him to come with her, but Michael just grabs his gas can again and starts pouring more gasoline on the walls. V runs back to the vault and looks inside, while Michael begins to light the gasoline, starting the fire that will burn down the whole bank. As the fire alarms go off, Ed, who is with Leah now, points out that the police will have to come into the bank now. Leah realizes that time is running out, so she quickly cuts Ed free, hands him a knife, and tells him to let the hostages go. She grabs the duffel bag full of cash and hurries down to the basement. In the basement, Michael starts throwing Molotov cocktails into different rooms as he walks by, causing the fire to spread quickly. Leah runs toward the escape pipe, but she thinks she hears Michael calling for her. Confused, she follows the sound and ends up at the vault. When she enters the vault, she gets lost in her thoughts for a moment, but suddenly, she becomes aware that the ghosts of the hostages are surrounding her. The vault door begins to close, and she fights to get her arm through it. After struggling, she finally manages to pry it open with Michael's help. Together they run, trying to escape the ghostly hostages. Michael throws Molotov cocktails behind them to slow them down, but soon he falls behind, and Leah reaches the escape pipe first. She calls for Michael, but as she listens, she hears a soft song playing down the hallway. Through the smoke of the fire, the masked man and several ghostly hostages appear, with Michael following them. Realizing they're about to kill Leah, Michael opens a gas line and lights it, causing an explosion that takes out the masked man and the ghosts just as Leah enters the escape pipe. The next scene shows Leah driving down a quiet road, the radio softly playing in the background. The radio host talks about the robbery, saying the police believe all the suspects are dead. Leah pulls over to the side of the road, and the camera slowly moves to show V standing there, revealing that she made it out safely. V angrily asks where the money is and what happened to Michael. Leah gets out of the car, grabs the duffel bag of cash, and throws it at V's feet. She explains that Michael didn't make it, and she begs V to tell her she saw the ghost too, so Leah can be sure she's not going crazy. V, looking confused, says she doesn't know what she saw. She only remembers the police shooting at her, not the rest. In a police interrogation room, Detective Tom is asking the hostages questions. He's trying to find out who helped the robbers with the vault codes, the alarm system, and how they got into the basement. Each hostage says they didn't recognize Ed, even though he had said he was the assistant bank manager. When Detective Tom starts questioning Susan, one of the few hostages who admitted to seeing Ed, she sees his picture on the wall. She recognizes him immediately. Detective Tom tells her that it's impossible, because Ed was one of the original victims from the 1982 robbery. Susan suddenly realizes Ed was a ghost, and that's why he knew all about the vault in the basement. The film cuts back to the same scene from the beginning, where Ed is in the break room. This time, however, he hears screams and gunshots from outside the break room. He quickly calls the police, and the call sounds just like the one Leah had heard during the robbery. At the spot where Leah and V were supposed to meet, Leah's car won't start. V gets out to check the engine. Suddenly, the radio turns on by itself, and every station is playing the same song, the same one that Leah heard in the basement of the bank. When V drops the car's hood, Leah turns around and sees the masked man standing behind her. She screams just as he snaps V's neck. The screen goes black, and the credits start to roll. So, which awesome movie should we recap next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below and let's make it happen. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you never miss out on our movie recaps. We've got plenty more coming your way. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Produced by Warner Movie Recaps.